Some statistics for you before we get into a fairly heavy piece. Now, generally, some of the statistics on this show have revealed all sorts of horrors and fraud on a massive scale, but these will make people go, 13 presidents, 4 vice presidents, 40 prime ministers, 5 deputy prime ministers, 2 chancellors, 1 vice chancellor, 251 ministers, 9 deputy ministers, all resigned in the last 24 months. Oops. And some people say nothing's happening. I found this piece this week, and it's in support of what Candace Owens was saying last week, and not the racist, divisive Jesse Jackson and others of his ilk have done or said to the black people. That doesn't and hasn't helped the black people one iota. And what it's really done is enhanced their own downfall. Now, this piece was written by a black American named Walter E. Williams. And he said that the problems of today's black Americans are a result of a legacy of slavery, racial discrimination, and poverty has achieved its axiomatic status, thought to be self-evident and beyond question. And this is what academics and the civil rights establishments have taught us. But as with so much of what is claimed by leftists, there is little evidence to support it. He said the number one problem amongst the black people is the effects stemming from a very weak family structure. Children from fatherless homes are more likely to drop out of high school, die by suicide, have behavioural disorders, join gangs, commit crimes, and end up in prison. They are also likelier to live in poverty-stricken households. But is the weak black family a legacy of slavery or not? In 1960, just 22% of black children were raised in a single-parent family. 50 or so years later, more than 70% of black children were raised in a single-parent family. 22 to more than 70%. And he said, here's my question. Was the increase in single-parent black families after 1960 a legacy of slavery, or might it be a legacy of the welfare state ushered in by the war on poverty? ? According to the 1938 Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, that year, 11% of black children were born to unwed mothers. Today, about 75% of black children are born to unwed mothers. And he asked, is that supposed to be a delayed response to the legacy of slavery? He said the bottom line is that the black family was stronger in the first 100 years after slavery than during what it will be in the second 100 years following. At one time, he said, almost all black families were poor, regardless of whether one or both parents were present. Today, roughly 30% of blacks are poor. However, two-parent black families are rarely poor. only 8% of black married couple families live in poverty. Among black families in which both the husband and wife work full-time, the poverty rate is under 5%. In comparison, poverty in black families headed by single women is 37%. He said, the undeniable truth is that neither slavery nor Jim Crow nor the harshest racism has decimated the black family the way the welfare state has. The black family structure is not the only retrogression suffered by blacks in the age of racial enlightenment. Labour unions, he said, have a long history of discrimination against blacks. Frederick Douglass wrote about this in his 1874 essay titled The Folly, Tyranny and Wickedness of Labour Unions. And also Booker T. Washington did so in his 1913 essay titled The Negro and the Labour Unions. To the detriment of their constituents, most of today's black politicians gave unquestioning support to labour laws pushed by unions and white liberal organisations. And then he says, there's education. This I found staggering, but it is correct. Many black 12th graders, which I think is 17, deal with scientific problems at the same level of whites in the 6th grade. They write and do math about as well as a white 7th and 8th grader. All of this means that an employer hiring or a college admitting the typical black high school graduate is in effect hiring or admitting an 8th grader. Thus, one should not be surprised by the outcomes. "6 years behind and 4 to 5 years behind on writing and math. The most damage done to black Americans is inflicted by those politicians, civil rights leaders and academics who assert that every problem confronting blacks is a result of a legacy of slavery and discrimination. He said that's a vision that guarantees perpetuity for the problems. In every census, this surprised me also, in every census from 1890 to 1954, blacks were either just as active or more so than whites in the labour market. During that earlier period, black teen unemployment was roughly equal to or less than white teen unemployment. As early as 1900, the duration of black unemployment was 15% shorter than that of whites. Today, it's about 30% longer. Would anyone suggest that during those earlier periods there was less racial discrimination? What goes a long way towards an explanation of yesteryear and today are the various labour laws and regulations promoted by liberals and their union allies that cut off the bottom rungs of the economic ladder and encourage racial discrimination. You know, that's a sobering piece of truth that mirrors much of what we said in this show. You can label people all you like, but once you wrap humans into a pity party and woe is me, there's always a program behind it. Boogeymen, slavery, religious oppression, countries opposed, fake wars with fake death tolls, whilst ignoring the real death toll and who the real victims all play into this. Now, the black community, whilst facing external issues, some of which is of their own making, via Black Lives Matter, Jesse Jackson, the Obamas and Oprah Winfrey, who have done nothing for the black people whatsoever, except confirm stereotypes. Like I said in one show, there's lots of money floating around within the black communities that are collected by a few and none of it shared within their own community. Not only that, but they rub their own people's noses in it by driving around in flash cars and all kinds of bling. Well, that behaviour is no different to the so-called elites, white or otherwise. A raft of black sportsmen earning vast quantities and yet little given back to their own people. Some do, but most don't. Like Kanye West complaining he was $35 million overdrawn in 1 year, despite earning $115 million that year. They're no different. One of the things that the black people complained about a few decades ago, that they were not going into important positions or high-paid jobs. Well, they can't complain about that now, right? We've had a black president. But what has changed in their community? Nothing. 8 years of a black president and nothing changed for the black community. And they'll still blame the whites, which is about as stupid as the Irish blaming the British royal family. You're missing the point. And why are so many of the black communities, by and large, ghettos? There's no need for it. You've got black people with money who move out of their own communities, and what do? They join the white communities. Of all the places to go, they go to the so-called enemy, according to many Black Lives Matter anyway, who have been racist and abusive to them forever, we are told. But now suddenly they have the money, they join those communities and it's all forgotten. Well, it's okay now because we've got money. No, what about your own people left in the communities? You just took the money out of the community. And the gist is they know deep down is what they were promoting or being promoted within the black communities was false, is why. But the pity party and reparation programming crew runs deep, not just in the black communities either. You know, ghettos were not created by the system. They're created by the people themselves. It costs nothing to pick litter up. A few people getting together a few hours a week to clean up their neighbourhood. And yet the ghettos remain. Then you've got actors like AOC and Omar who are hampering their own communities and quantifying racial stereotyping, and yet no one says anything. The political correctness brigade spent years changing the words and the stereotyping against blacks, only for the blacks to then create racial stereotyping and call all whites privileged, supremacists or Nazis. And yet nobody says anything. Is that not racial stereotyping? So you're doing exactly the same thing and creating the same problem. It doesn't matter which side says it. It's still the same problem. The black community, the same as every other community, needs to take a long, hard look at themselves, like this author has. Finger pointing has not worked. People of colour being in high paid or profile jobs has not changed anything. Killing each other has not worked. The only job is crime has not worked. And your community leaders, various Black Lives Matter and Black Panthers and all the others promoting stereotypes has also not worked. And despite giving extra help in all walks of life, and including in education and the welfare state, as the guy mentioned, the problems remain. Why? Because the problem was you. And you can rail at people, including the author, and my input all you like, but the song remains the same. A lack of personal responsibility. You change that and all those problems go away. One of the great unanswered questions that I would like to find out is why the so-called first peoples on this planet, and we've all been told, wrongly in my opinion, that everything came out of Africa, is why they're so far behind in everything. You've heard about how far behind they're in education. But why? If they've lived on this planet longer than everybody else, why didn't they build their own civilizations way ahead of any other colour? Let's take the comparison to the whites out of the equation. Why did the yellow, red and brown people build civilizations up and not the black people? It is the great unanswered question. And the people can go on blaming whites or any other colour. But going back many millennia, when all creeds had the same relatively empty blank slate planet to create, and yet even to this day as a collective, they're not developing in a way that would be beneficial for all the black people. And my question is, are the genetic codes for black people tainted to poor development, violence and voodoo, infected by the Kali Ma? Or is this archetype genetic code? And people can claim that as racist all you like. I don't particularly care, as I know different. And if you react to this, it means I, and also the author, have struck a raw nerve of truth, which bothers people far more than the lie. And I would much prefer you to ponder on the points made by the author than use stereotypical responses to personal criticism and shout racist. It has, and it will, solve nothing. And I hope the black people can all come together and correct the issues within their own communities, and quickly. It's not right that your children are 5 and 6 years behind. Could it be the family issue, as the author said? It's possible. It's staggering that 70% are out of wedlock. 70% plus. And also single women. You know, what's happening with the black males? Why are you deserting all your females and leaving them with children? Final piece before we go into a music break. This was written by one of the members in response to a piece we did recently of What is Love? And he or she, I think it was he, wrote this. This is relative love and absolute. There is relative love and absolute love. And it is a skill which has to be trained. The relative love is defined by anyone who encounters and experiences it. It's relative and limited through the experiences some made. It's part of the absolute love. But what is absolute love? That's something only the Most High knows, because there are no limits to it. So it's not possible to define it with limited words, which is correct. It's in a way the same as relative truth and absolute truth. The first everyone can try to find for themselves through limited external and internal senses. The latter is only known by the Most High. We cannot define something so high with only our limited words and experiences, but we can try. Most people I know live only a way of fish love, as I call it. It's false and designed to fade away, because it's not based in the truth. It's fake. So everyone has a true definition of love, but it's just part of the all. It's a perspective based on experiences.